My name is Susana Perez. I teach at Alverno. I work at the World Language Department, and I'm going to present Jennifer. She's going to be one moment. She's going to present cultivating female leaders. Okay. Jennifer is okay. Jennifer is she is specialized in marketing across all industries: healthcare, financial service, nonprofit, goods and services. She's certified in leadership development, training and coaching, and she has a lot of decades specializing in marketing, innovation, and growth. She has dedicated her career to building the success of others. Her specialty as a public speaker and motivating coach has led to accelerate business results for her client, as well as foundational change in leadership development. Her marketing strategies, leadership development, and brand building help clients utilize dynamic teams and tactics through a disciplined approach. She has the skill to identify business needs, structure a meticulous strategy, and lead disciplined teams toward achievement. So welcome to Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you, Susanna. I love that you said multiple decades and didn't say how many. I really appreciate that. Let's go with that, right? Because I started working when I was 5, which is great. So no, I'm really thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. As I had mentioned to you earlier when we were chatting, just the two of us, that a real passion point for me is cultivating leaders, giving people the opportunity to grow into really effective leadership. And I think that we have such a lovely opportunity at this moment in time to really focus on our female leaders and bridge that gap that we continue to talk about. And I think that people, sometimes because of the amount of talking we do about it, are under the impression that the progress we're making is good enough. And I think that we have much ground to cover and much opportunity to get further faster. And so the opportunity today is to talk a little bit about how we can do that. So I'm really, really excited. I'm hoping that you, Susanna, will be able to help me if some questions or any comments come through on the chat. I can't see that on my screen right now, so just give me a heads up and let me know. I would love for this to be as interactive as possible.
If you prefer, Jennifer, we can talk at the end. We can answer the chat question at the end, or you want when they are at the same time they are coming through?
Whatever's easiest. Whatever's easiest for you.
Okay. We'll do them at the end.
Okay, sounds great. All right, so what I hope to achieve today with everybody is a few items here. So as we talk about cultivating female leaders, we want to be sure that we understand the current state of female leadership. Again, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that the progress we've made is further than it actually is. So I think it's really important to get a baseline of what we're starting with, and then talk about why it's so important. I think as we talk about diverse leadership, certainly today we're talking about female leadership in general, but there's even more of a need to create diversity at the leadership level as it applies to not just gender diversity, but diversity in race, religion, representation. There's so much that we can be doing. And so a lot of what we talk about today can speak to diversity at a higher level. We want to take a practical approach to identify sort of a little bit more what gender bias looks like in the workplace, because I think that, you know, people take the class, people take a course once a year and say, yep, I know how to identify gender bias. Yep, I know what gender bias is. Let's check that box and move on. But what does it practically look like in day to day? I don't think we do enough to identify the mistakes we're making in identifying and doing something about gender bias. And then how do we re-envision the role of a female leader and what we can do to create more opportunity? And this is where we'll get into a little bit the role and responsibility, not just of women, because we talk very much about raising each other up and pulling each other along, but but identifying the opportunity for male leaders to cultivate female leadership. So I don't want this to come off as you know, I'm a man hater or anything like that. I happen to love men. I married one and gave birth to another one. So I'm a big fan. But I do think that because there are still so many men at the top of the leadership ladder, that there is a responsibility that they hold in promoting female leadership. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then finally kind of land on what those real true foundational leadership traits are and why they're genderless, why they shouldn't have to be associated with one particular gender, that leadership should be blind to a certain perspective, and that it doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter what gender you identify with, it doesn't matter what race or religion you are. What matters is that you have these foundational traits. So we'll kind of bring it full circle in that regard. So what's the current state? One of the things that you'll see as we go through this a bit is that I like to pull from people that you might recognize a little bit more than me. So I have quotes throughout that I think serve as inspiration, serve to ground us in our purpose today. So when we think about the current state of women in leadership and just women in general, I think I'm not necessarily saying you should be a big fan of Angelina Jolie. I'm not necessarily, but she is a UN ambassador. She's an activist, and she does a lot to promote equality and the plight of women across the world, across the globe. And this quote, I think, is really a great way to kind of create a touchstone as to where we are as women in this world. And that there are countless examples of women rising and taking leadership and taking their destiny into their own hands, which is an inspiration, absolutely. But women and girls are still the majority of victims of war. There's still more than half of all refugees, and the vast majority of victims of violence, of rape, sexual and gender-based violence, and really, gender-based discrimination. And so while we continue to make strides, I think this quote does a lovely job of grounding us in that there's still so much more to do. So as we talk about that a little bit more, what are the numbers telling us, right? Let's ground this in statistics, because I'm sure we all have opinions, right? And opinions are great, but let's give them some foundation. So as we talk about how women are represented currently in roles in leadership, 24% of the Senate seats currently are held by women, and 27% of the House of Representatives seats are held by women. Let's jump to the last bubble on the page. 51% of the US population are women. So as you can see, we're not even getting close to 50% representation in the highest areas of government. And let's just make note, absolutely, let's not take away from the recognition of Vice President Harris being the first woman to hold that office, which is a tremendous accomplishment for women of color. I believe it is wonderful. But let's not forget, we still don't have one in the top seat, right? We still haven't had a woman in the top seat. And when it comes to representation in forms of government, we still have a long way to go. So when we look at who's heading up these the top industries, the top organizations in industry, we look at who are the CEOs of those Fortune 500 companies that are driving the economy. 7% are women. 7%. Okay, look at the second to last bubble. 47% of the current workforce is made up of women. And yet only 7% of the people who hold the most control, the most leadership, only 7% are women. And only 21% of C-suite members in Fortune 500 companies are women. We still have a lot of representation we need to get. And so while we are improving in our progress, by no means do these speak to equality. By no means do these numbers speak to equity. So we still have room to grow. In addition, I think a lot of attention is spent on the wage gap, which, believe me, it needs attention, right? Even in 2021, women on average are still only making 81 cents for every dollar that men make. same position, same qualifications, same education, and we're still making less. And for every woman, or for every man rather, that's promoted, out of every 100 men promoted to a manager or management position, only 85 women were promoted. Same qualifications, same education, same resume. We still have room to grow. And it's not just about the dollars. The dollars are important, but you don't get the dollars without the growth. And we're not getting the growth. Let's take that a step further in looking at male-dominated industries, okay? When we look at the legal profession, medicine, academia, financial services. Financial services is a big one. I can't, my most recent leadership position was in financial services. So how are women represented? In the profession, we're getting there, right? 45% of women in the legal profession are associates, okay? But only 22% have made partner, and only 19% are equity partners in law firms. That's a huge disparity. When you look at medicine, okay, we're getting close to that 50%, right? 40% of physicians and surgeons are women. However, the people who are creating the knowledge, who are creating the doctors and surgeons who are going out and treating patients, only 16% of medical school deans are women. We are terribly underrepresented there at the core foundation of how this profession creates physicians and surgeons. In academia, 53% cracked the halfway mark, right? We cracked 50% there. 53% of all of those who hold doctorate degrees are women. And yet, only 32% are full professors and only 30% are college presidents. Again, underrepresented. I need more coffee. Underrepresented at the point in which the foundational education is taking place for the people who are teaching others. And then from a financial service perspective, across the board, where we've got 61% of accountants and auditors are women. Woohoo! And again, we cracked the 50% mark. 53% financial managers, 37% are financial analysts. And yet, when it comes to that top financial position, not even CEO, right? CFO, 12% are women. There's still a barrier we can't get past, and we need to figure out a way to do that. And if you're looking at this, flip the stats on their head. That means 88%, again, I'm on my first cup of coffee, 88% of CFOs are men. So how do we, as women, get to those leadership positions? We have to look at our male counterparts. We have to look at our male leaders and ensure that they are not using gender bias to create succession planning and to grow their leadership teams. So why should we care, right? Why does diverse leadership matter, especially when we're talking about gender diversity? Well, I have some big love for the notorious RBG, right? I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg because I think she did so much too for the advancements of women. And it doesn't matter which political side you're on. What matters is how we work together to promote women in leadership. And I think she did a wonderful job of simply articulating that we belong everywhere decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that we're the exception. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I love this quote. This is one of my favorites of all time. People ask me sometimes, will there be enough women? When will there be enough women on the court? And her answer was when there are 9. And people are shocked, people balked at that and were like expecting her to say half, right? She said, but there had been 9 men and nobody ever raised a question about that. And so what she was saying is not that women should overtake the court, but there should not be this acceptance that when it's all men, it's okay, but when it's all women, it's been flipped on its head. It shouldn't matter. And I think that's really pointed. I think that's really brilliant and very insightful. And you can tell me I'm wrong, but that's my opinion. So let's get to the bottom line, right? How does gender equity and gender diversity within leadership impact our bottom line? Because that's what we're all in it for, right? We all want to be making money. We all want success. We all want, growth. It's hard to argue when you see that research shows that company profits and share performance can be close to 50% higher when women are well represented in leadership. When women are at the top, companies perform better. It's in the data. It's in the statistics. Go ahead and Google it after we're done today. You'll find plenty of information that proves my point. Employees at women-led companies demonstrate a stronger belief in the strategy that's put out by senior leadership, right? So you get better buy-in from your employees when you have women at the top. You have a deeper conviction from those employees about the products and services the company promotes. And you have a significant impact on engagement, enablement, and performance. All of those things lead to better productivity. All of those things contribute to an improved bottom line. And essentially, that last quote, research published last year in the Harvard Business Review showed that over several surveys, disconnected surveys that were done multiple times to different audiences that asked the same questions, women consistently ranked higher than men on almost all key factors of leadership capabilities. So not only are we recognizing that women are amazing leaders, sometimes we score better than our male counterparts because of the abilities that we bring, not because we're women, but because of who we are, because of what we've achieved. So I'm not trying to promote the fact that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. We're both from Earth, right? We're all human and we all bring really lovely individuality to the roles that we have. But being able to recognize that individuality without making gender a consideration is a key component we need to be integrating into what we do. Again, why does gender diversity in leadership matter? Think about the more diverse you have, the more diversity you have in thought process, in innovation, the more creative you're going to be, the more innovative you're going to be because you have different points of view, you have different lenses to look through. You can enhance collaboration among all employees, including leadership, because it is more engaging to see someone who looks like you, talks like you, sounds like you, understands you in a leadership position. You're going to feel more connected to what leadership is doing. It improves staff retention and reduces turnover. There are more mentorship programs when women are at the top. There's an improved understanding of customer and client needs. There's an improved organizational representation, right? Reputation means something. Companies are expected to be more broad-minded and more tolerant and have a better culture when they see gender diversity in the culture, gender diversity in leadership. And then finally, increased profitability positively impacts the bottom line. We know that. We know that women at the top increase profitability and improve the bottom line. So how do we do that, right? How do we identify gender bias, especially when it comes in leadership? And what mistakes are we making, right? Because I think we're doing a lot to educate people on what gender bias looks like, but are we doing enough to do something about it? It's not just enough to check the box. Another woman of whom I am a huge, huge fan is Sheryl Sandberg, who's the COO of Facebook. And I love this quote, the next time you call a girl bossy, say instead she has executive leadership skills, right? Because what we're talking about is the lens we look through for women oftentimes is different than the lens we look through for men. We talk about, Betty Davis once said, when a man gives his opinion, he's a leader, and when a woman gives her opinion, she's a bitch. Sorry for my colorful language, because bitch isn't a 4-letter word, so I can't say that. It's a 5-letter word. So, but the point being that we look through a different lens when we talk about women leaders than we do with men. And oftentimes, I love this quote, a weapon men use consistently against women is the refusal to take them seriously. And so it's one thing to give women a voice. We have a voice, right? It's one thing for women to have a voice. It's another thing for people to listen And I think that's the turning point that we're at. I want to share a quick story before we move into the next slide. I think we've all experienced gender bias. And I think one of the mistakes that we all make is we try to brush it off, right? We try to say, oh, that's just the way the person is, or that's just something we as women have learned to get used to, right? It's just something that we've learned to accept. So in working with an organization, we were getting ready for a meeting and I was sitting in a conference room and there were two other people in the conference room. And one was another woman in leadership from a different department. And the other was a male leader from a different department. And we were just kind of chatting about our kids and chatting about life and all that kind of fun stuff. And the gentleman was relatively new to the organization and was talking about, we were kind of learning a little bit more about him, his wife, his kids. And he said, yeah, so my wife stays home with our kids. And I said, well, that's great. And he said, yeah, we decided that it was more important for her to stay home with our kids because, we felt like the data shows that the mother should be home with the children, and the man should work because it's better for them psychologically and, they do better in school, and went on and on and on. And I'm kind of staring at this fellow going, you realize you're talking to two working moms right now, right? And the sheer ignorance to that fact was such an obvious note of you are gender biased without even realizing what's coming out of your mouth at this time. And so, I actually felt sorry for him for not even being self-aware enough about making that comment. And the other woman and I kind of gave each other looks of recognition, like, wow, that was really stupid. But the challenge is I made one of the mistakes that's on this slide. I didn't do anything about it. And the reason I didn't do anything about it at the time, in part, was because it's just the way it is sometimes. It's just the way it is for us as women. We're so used to those stupid comments. We're so used to that flippant sort of attitude that we sometimes just take it and move on. And I also thought about it after the fact and said, well, okay, what am I going to do? Complain to HR that he's stupid? Right? I mean, I'm being really genuine with you guys because I want you to understand, I know that it is a challenge. That fear of speaking up is a mistake that we make, either because we're afraid of retribution, right? We're afraid that if we bring something up, it's going to come back on us negatively. Or we're afraid if we bring something up, we're going to be looked at again with gender bias. Oh, she's just being an emotional woman. Oh, she's just too sensitive. But if we continue to perpetuate that behavior, it becomes part of the problem. So I use myself as an example because I too have made those mistakes. And I'm not saying you need to raise the red flag every time somebody says something stupid, otherwise you'll never get your work done. But I am saying that if you recognize a pattern from an individual or a group of individuals, it is incumbent upon you, male or female, or whatever you identify with, that you need to say something. Okay, so we talk about on this slide, education without practice. This is what I said earlier. Like, we all have that seminar that we attend, or the yearly training that we have to do where take a course on gender bias. Yep, I checked the box. Yep, all the male leaders in the organization check the box. Everybody knows what gender bias looks like. But do we identify it in the day-to-day? Sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's when you walk into a conference room and there are no seats at the table because all the men are already sitting down and the women sit off to the side or pull a chair in and sit along the wall instead of pulling that chair up to the table. Sometimes it's little things, like including only the men in leadership on a particular conversation, or expecting the women to find growth opportunities from other women leaders. Or it's having an employee resource group for women and depending upon that resource group to talk about areas of opportunity with other leadership. There's more that can be done. There's more that we need to do to put it into practice. Yes, we talk about unequal compensation because it's real, it's true, it's out there. End of story. Women should make the same as men if they're doing the same job. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what their gender is. One thing that we can do is continue to review pay ranges, do periodic compensation reviews, so that we're making sure that there is equity, that there is parity. And if there isn't, we need to do something. That's where you raise the red flag. That's where you make noise. That's where you raise the argument until we achieve what we need to do. We also talk about biased recruitment trends. So in a conference room setting, or if we were actually in a room together, I would say raise your hand if you have ever had to recruit or interview for, somebody for a position, right? I'm sure many of you would be raising your hands. Biased recruitment trends can be real sneaky, right? Job descriptions can potentially have masculine or feminine descriptors, or we don't even realize it. A lot of times we associate masculinity with the words competitive. You need to dominate in the sales area, be outspoken, be decisive. And yet we use words like loyal and collaborative and empathetic that generally tend to associate more feminine. Okay, so even thinking about gender charged words in job description is going to be really important. And in recruitment practices, a lot of times we fall into the habit of hiring somebody who looks like us, sounds like us, right? And what we want to do is we want to be more diverse in our hiring practices, to look for different points of view, to look for different things that could come to the table. And oftentimes that means going outside of your gender group. Oftentimes that means going outside of, what you look like, sound like, act like. So we need to encourage, again, those male leaders who are at the end of the hiring process to say, did you envision a man when you started recruiting for this? Because oftentimes you don't realize that they were. And then you end up with another male leader. So we need to extract those perceptions from the hiring practice. And we can't ignore the signs. Like I said earlier, oh, that's just the way that he is, or don't take it personally. That phrase in and of itself, I've heard so many times, don't take it personally. And yes, I absolutely, can be super hardcore, like business is business. I'm not a crier. I am very direct and very decisive. I'm very non-feminine sometimes, right? In my leadership. But when somebody says to me, don't take it personally, oftentimes it's because they want to dismiss the gender bias. Oh, he didn't mean it that way. Okay, well, how did he mean it then? Right? It has to be a conversation. We can't ignore the signs. We can't not talk about it. I remember sitting in an employee calibration where, we as a leadership team were going through our entire staff to talk about who was going to get promoted, who's going to get a raise, who's going to get bonus, kind of where were we ranking everybody, so that there was equity across the team, right? We're using as much of an equal lens for everybody across the team. And I remember one of my male counterparts saying, well, can we really rate her as exceeds expectations? Because she was gone on maternity leave. Oh, you can't say that. You can't think that. Like, that's not okay. And bless his heart, one of my favorite people in the entire world. But I said, dude, you can't decide she doesn't exceed expectations because she had a baby. Did the work that she did over the time that she was there exceed your expectations? Then that's the ranking she gets. It's that simple. Well, we don't even realize that consideration is taking place. We have to talk about it. We have to put it out on the table. Sometimes people don't know what they don't know. The person I'm talking about right now, one of the greatest champions of women, 100%, love him dearly, didn't know he was saying something biased. If we don't teach people, then it's on us. We have to bring it to the table. We have to speak up. Talked a little bit about that, but again, find a safe place. If you don't have someone in your organization that you can raise the concern to, even if HR isn't friendly to this information, find an outside source like an ethics hotline that your organization has. Reach out to someone. Do not stay silent. And finally, we talk about mistakes that we make are not having diverse mentorship. Okay. Oftentimes we gender mentor, right? Women mentor women, men mentor men. We have to start mentoring leaders across the genders in order to help them grow. It should not matter what somebody's gender is and as to whether or not you decide to mentor them, or going to a male leader and asking for mentorship, asking for sponsorship from that leader. There should not be a gender bias, because there is a way that those relationships can help promote awareness of skills, ability, and ultimately promotion. So what can you do? So here's where we get into our roles and responsibilities in promoting female leaders. So again, fun quotes. It's by standing up for the rights of girls and women that we truly measure up as men. Love that from Desmond Tutu. Rick Goings, the CEO of Tupperware. Some things just cannot wait, and men must stand up now for women's equality. It's everyone's problem. It's everyone's issue. We need to make it everybody working towards the solution. And Emma Watson, sweet Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter movies, is also a wonderful, feminist activist. And she said, men, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend your formal invitation. Gender equality is your issue too. It absolutely is. So what can we do? So I'm going to start on the right side, okay? I'm going to flip things on their head for a second. As women, what can we do to promote ourselves, to cultivate ourselves as female leaders? Sit at the table. Don't sit along the edge of the room, right? Take a seat at the table. If there isn't a seat at the table, get a lawn chair and bring it up to the table. Sit at the table. Make your presence known. Use your voice. Earlier, our keynote speaker, I hope some of you were able to listen to the keynote earlier today, she mentioned it's not enough to just sit at the table. You have to use your voice. Take advantage of that position at the table. Don't underestimate yourself. We negative self-talk so much as women. We talk ourselves out of what we are capable of. We talk ourselves out of our value. Or maybe I shouldn't go after that promotion. Maybe I shouldn't go after that opportunity. Maybe I shouldn't ask that person to mentor me. Don't ever let anybody tell you what you're worth. You and only you know your experience, know your value, know what you're capable of. Don't ever, ever, ever let someone else tell you you are not worth something. They don't know, and they don't have that right. Negotiate your value. Oftentimes we will find if women start at a lower salary, they continue to be behind the entire time they work for an organization. And then organizations can say, well, she didn't negotiate. When I was one of my most recent employers, I received a lovely offer from my employer, and I went back and I negotiated my salary. And the HR representative went to the hiring manager and came back, and she said, we'll give you what you're asking. When I went to this person, who happened to be a man, and said, she's negotiating, he said, well, of course she's negotiating. She's in marketing. And I loved that. It wasn't because I was a woman. It was because I was in marketing. Marketers negotiate. Salespeople negotiate. It's what we do, right? You always know the first offer is never the real offer. Negotiate your value. You're worth more, okay? And reach for that promotion. You are worthy. You as women are worthy of anything and everything that the world has to offer you. Reach for it. Even if you say, oh, I might be moving, or oh, it might upset my husband, or oh, there might be somebody more qualified, or oh, I really know this person might be promoting from within. BS, reach for that promotion. Own your success. Don't apologize for it. Don't be ashamed of growing and learning and leading. It's an opportunity that is a gift. Every day is a gift. Every growth is a gift. Own it. And don't label your choices as success limiting. No woman should ever be put in a position where she has to decide, am I going to grow in my career or am I going to have a family? Because I guarantee you, no man ever asked himself that question. Don't label your choices as success limiting. You don't have to choose. And finally, when you have an opportunity as a female leader, mentor, sponsor, support other women leaders. Look for the opportunity to be diverse, not only in gender, but in race and representation. Give people the opportunity to grow and lead on your coattails. Bring them along for the journey. Raise them up and take them along with you. Now, men. Once again, I will say, I love men. I married one. I gave birth to another one. I even got a male dog laying behind me in my office. I love men. You have an opportunity to contribute to the value here. So first and foremost, I want you to ask yourself, in every situation, especially those difficult conversations, ask yourself, if this were a man, would I ask that question? Would I react differently? Would I ever say that to a man? I had somebody, a male leader in an organization, shushed me in a meeting once. Oh, I lost my marbles, I tell you, I lost my marbles. But I kept it together in the meeting. And I went and I approached him alone in an office and I said, did you shush me? And he said, oh, did I? I didn't realize. I said, let's get something straight. I am a grown-ass woman. I am an adult. You do not shush me. You would never shush a man. You do not shush me. Well, guys, I'm so sorry. I totally did not even realize that I did that. You're right. That's so offensive. I said, that's right. That is offensive. You don't ever do it again. And he never did. But you got to take the moment and you have to point out when we're being treated differently than a man. And perhaps I was a bit confrontational, it's a little heated, but I didn't let it rest. I didn't let it go. Oftentimes, gender stereotypes are put on us and we don't even realize it. Men are assertive. Women are aggressive. Men are leaders. Women are bossy. Men are honest. Women are difficult. Men are angry. Women are emotional. No. If I get riled up over an injustice, it's because it's an injustice. It's not because I'm a woman. If I confront a difficult situation, it's not because I'm aggressive. It's because I have an opinion. It doesn't matter what your gender is. And don't describe someone because you think they're a woman. Somebody looked at me when we were talking about evaluating members of the staff and said, oh, she's just so emotional. Hold up. You can't use emotional to describe an employee. That is not fair. That is gender bias. But she just gets so upset about everything. Why is she getting upset? Because things aren't inequitable. She's upset because things are not being done right. Let's talk about that. Ask the hard questions. Take notice of the contributions of women. Men, the women in your business are driving your productivity just as much as the men are, if not more. Recognize that women are probably making more sacrifices, taking on more, juggling more responsibility than their male counterparts, because not only are they delivering at work, they're coming home and taking on gender stereotypes at home, especially if they're a single parent. They're doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the child rearing. They're making sure that the kids have their immunizations. They're making sure that lunches are packed. They're making sure that the kids have what they need the next day. They're making sure that the lawn is mowed. They're making sure that the bills are getting paid. And then they're going and delivering at the same level as their male counterparts. And then they're not getting recognized. And then don't rely on women's organizations to do the heavy lifting. Don't rely on other women to promote women leaders. Men in leadership have a responsibility to cultivate female leaders, especially in male-dominated industries. There is no substitute for support, and men must be part of the solution because they're in the leadership roles. There is no other way. We have to make sure that we are not judging women just because they're women. If I had to take a day off, if I had to take a day off because my son was sick, I have a photo of my son's head laying on my lap. I took a picture of it while I was on a Zoom meeting. We juggle so much more, oftentimes, than our male counterparts. And I'm not saying that there aren't men out there who are contributing 100% at home. They are, and who are doing a lot of the things that women are doing. I do not discount that at all. But acknowledging that each human experience is different helps to eliminate a gender bias. Engaging with the individual and learning what their personal story is and in learning what their personal contribution is allows us to take gender out of the equation. Great leadership is genderless, bar none. It just is. I love this quote from Andy Simon. She is a corporate anthropologist. She does a ton of research, and she essentially has said it's time we start seeing women leaders through a fresh lens. And when we do, we'll all benefit from their styles and their successes because we all bring unique benefits to leadership roles. It doesn't matter what parts we have, right? It doesn't matter what our gender is. It doesn't matter what our orientation is. It doesn't matter what the color of our skin is. It doesn't matter. We all bring value, and it's time to start noticing that. And ultimately, feminism over the last 50 years has become kind of a dirty word. And it shouldn't be, because really what it is it's not about making women stronger. I love this quote. Women are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to think about. We are incredibly strong individuals, not because we're bossy, not because we're aggressive. It's because we're women. It's because we're human. So great leadership skills are genderless. What does that look like? So one vital thing that our keynote speaker said earlier today also is that training is so very, very important. We need to train our leaders. We need to train people to be better at leading individuals. Expectations of diverse leaders can be identified. They can be trained. They can't be assumed, right? So I put together a grid here of leadership traits. I will say that gratuitously, I will tell you, I have developed a program that trains leaders in these areas because it really should be, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter any of those things. If you can master the skills on this slide, you will be a leader of astronomical, proportions. It will be phenomenal. Leaders take action. Doesn't matter if you're male or female. Leaders are self-aware and have self-confidence, and yet are humble and empathetic. It's a lovely, delicate balance that we need to achieve. Leaders lead by example and practice a leadership mindset. Having leadership mindset means focusing on growth, focusing on individuality, continuous learning. Those are all key components of being an effective leader. None of the things I'm describing, being able to deal with difficult conversations, having vision and strategy, none of those require female body parts or male body parts. We all have the capability of doing these things. None of these things require a particular skin color, a particular age, a particular religious affiliation. All of these things can be mastered. Doesn't matter what gender you are. Managing up, down, and across. Great leaders lead the top as well as the bottom and their peer group. Leadership is an embodiment of these skills, of these competencies. It doesn't require us to be male, female, or anything in between. So if you want to become an effective leader, if you want to grow your leadership base in a way where you have succession planning and a really strong bench for your leadership of tomorrow, these are the skills you need to focus on, not whether or not it's a man or a woman. And finally, I want to land on another quote from Sheryl Sandberg that says, "We cannot change what we are not aware of. And once we are aware, we cannot help but change." If anything, I hope our conversation today, and unfortunately it hasn't been much of a conversation because Zoom doesn't really allow for that, but I hope with the information that we've talked about today or that I've shared today has at least illustrated what we need to know, what we need to be aware of. Because once you're aware not only of the issues, but of what you can do to change the situation, you must be compelled to do those things, to be a part of the change. You must be part of actively changing the story and encouraging others to actively be a part of changing the story. Getting men involved, getting your leadership involved, getting each other involved, and making it everybody's issue. That's when we will achieve equity. That's when we will achieve representation. That's when we will know that we are effectively leading because of what we bring to the table, not whether or not we have a particular body part. So I'm ready for your questions or comments or stories or issues or, "Hey, Jen, I think you were totally wrong about this," or, "Hey, I really think you forgot to mention this." I want to hear from you.
I congratulations, it was beautiful. I really enjoyed it. But I want to tell you a couple of things.
Yes.
Because I was thinking in my life, and I said, I'm from Spain, right? One part of this bias gender is cultural. Because
Yes.
cultural is, I remember my mom, I see my mothers, and I see my mom, and I remember my sisters being a mothers of girls and a boy. And it's a huge difference. When it's a boy, it's different. When it's a girl, it's different. And I see it here too, in my son's friends. When it's a girl, she knows how to do some things. When it's a boy, she doesn't do one thing. For instance, the girls has to help the mother to cook, to lay the table, and the boy go and fix the car and, mow the lawn. And that is bias, because it's like, so one thing that we should do too is look at us as a mother. How much we, I don't know the word, how much we take of our husband and our people and say, "Oh, you have to do this, you're the woman, oh, you are the woman."
I couldn't agree more. So my maiden name is Crivello. So I grew up with a big Italian papa, right? My dad was a big Sicilian papa, and I love him dearly. He has since passed, but yeah, he was one of those dads where my brother cut the grass and we helped my mom in the kitchen. And as we grew older and he realized he had some pretty lippy girls on his hands, right? We were pretty uppity. My sister and I would stand in for my brother and do his paper route. We would cut the grass, and my brother had to help my mom in the kitchen. And we flipped those gender roles on their head. My brother is now a really amazing cook, which is great. But it is something that can start in childhood. You're absolutely right. And I remember Lego sent a letter. I've seen this on social media where a letter has gone out with Lego toys, or used to, and it says these can be made into anything. And if your daughter decides to build a car and your son decides to build a doll with the Legos, that's okay. They're meant for imaginative play. And sort of looked at the gender stereotypes in the face with their toy and said, the world is what they make of it. But you're so right from a cultural perspective. And I brought up the fact that my dad was Italian because he's old school, right? He was raised in that environment. Nothing against Italians, I love my culture. But at the same time, we do have cultural influences that can stimulate bias, right? And we have to be knowledgeable about that, or what are we creating at home as well as what are we creating in the workplace. So I think, Susanna, that's an amazingly brilliant point.
And another thing that I was telling you by experience, I am the bossy one. Okay, I am the bossy one in my house, according to when I was growing up, because
Mhm.
I have only one brother and 5 sisters, but my sisters are very obedient. I am the crazy one. But one thing is like when the kids are, our kids are teenagers, they are afraid to talk. They are, because they don't want to become bossy. You don't want to be the one that is always arguing, always. So one thing is teachers, as a teacher, I think it's our responsibility to teach our girls and the students, say, hey, that is bias. But I think culturally around us, the environment, everything we are used to, we don't say anything until we grown up. And then we say, oh, I did this and they did that to me. I didn't speak up.
Mhm.
Now it's like when I see it, I say, what? But you don't want to be the one that is the bully of the bossy, the bossy one. So we need to, teachers, we need to, I think the way teachers and mothers, we need to say, hey, stop the bias.
I agree, but also as parents, I think that our husbands are equally responsible for being mindful of those gender and cultural stereotypes, because we don't want to perpetuate that. But also, I want to be sure that, again, we as women aren't taking all the responsibility on our shoulders to make the change. Your spouse should be your partner in this. And if you don't have a spouse, or if you don't have a partner, looking for ways to diminish those cultural or gender stereotypes is really, really important. So I think that it is important, or if you have a same-sex spouse, I think that it is important that you find a way to create that unbiased growth in your child. So I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Thank you, Jennifer. I have a question from the chat from Monique Wilson. She's asking, I'm sorry for my English, okay?
No, that's great.
Had you been in an environment where those around you were not open to breaking down gender biases? How do you suggest handle work placements that may be more conservative?
So yes, I have, and I'm sorry, it's Monique. Is the questioner?
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
yeah.
Great. So speaking to you specifically, Monique, yes, I have been in that situation where the openness has been sort of not there. And I have worked in very conservative industries. Again, I'll go back to financial services. So, it's kind of all a couple of things. So one thing, it's about the approach, right? It's about that fear of speaking up sometimes comes from, if I say something, they're just going to say it's because I'm a woman, right? So it kind of compounds the issue. It's trying to find a friendly ear, and sometimes that takes a couple tries, or it takes some investigation, and sometimes it's finding a woman who can kind of help crack that nut for you. Sometimes it's human resources. Sometimes it's a female leader. I'm not going to sit here and paint a rosy picture that every organization is going to be open to learning or hearing that there's gender bias. There are circumstances where the loudest you can be is by walking away from a situation. And I'm not encouraging anybody to quit their job because they've experienced bias or discrimination. But if you're exploring areas to find a solution and you're not getting any help, like I said, going to human resources is an incredibly powerful thing. Finding out if your organization has an ethics hotline where you can anonymously report bad behavior. Finding a leader or a mentor within the organization who has a stronger voice or who has the ear of leadership. Finding an employee resource group that is open to that information. Finding a peer in the industry. These are all ways that you can find support and help and report bias and discrimination. If you pursue those avenues and you're met with brick wall after brick wall after brick wall, you might be in the wrong place. And what I will tell you is that most organizations do exit interviews. Most organizations will kind of ask you why you're leaving. There's your opportunity. Employee retention is so vital to the bottom line of an organization. And if employees start to make a mass exodus because they're treated poorly, sometimes that's the catalyst for change. I'm not encouraging you to quit your job, but I am not going to sit here and tell you that there's a magic wand that you can wave and everything will be rosy. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. It's probably not the answer you wanted, Monique. I'm really sorry, but there are a lot of avenues that you can pursue before you decide to walk away from something. And there are, like, explore all of those, because you may be surprised at who those friendly people are. There may be a male leader in your organization who's extremely receptive to talking about gender equality and to eliminating bias, where maybe a female leader is less so. So do not make assumptions that just because someone is a man, they don't want to help you in diminishing gender bias. So look for those avenues. Start to explore where those friendly ears are so that you can find an opportunity to make change.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Well, thank
Any
you.
other questions?
And there is another question, guys. We have, sorry, we have. Do you have time for one more? Let's see.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And if there are more questions after the fact, or if there's something that somebody doesn't want to ask in the group, my email has been up on the screen and will stay up on the screen until the end, that if somebody wants to email me, they certainly can do that. Or if they want more information about leadership training or anything, that's where I'm available. So
I have one more from the chat from Emily Rosa. Do you think the way someone is raised plays a role in gender bias, gender inequality? If so, how do you suggest we make a change in this? Very good question.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question.
Sorry. Do you think the way someone is raised plays a role in gender bias or gender inequality? If yes. So, how do you suggest we make a change in that?
Yes, I absolutely do. It's a fantastic question. And it goes back to the question that you raised about cultural bias, right? So yes, I do believe that how someone is raised can absolutely contribute towards gender bias on both ends, right? I think if someone is raised to perceive gender stereotypes, they're certainly going to bring that belief into the workplace. It's no different than having the perception that, one group of individuals is better for some reason than another. So when we're all raised with some type of bias, right? That's something we continually work against throughout. Just as girls can be raised, to be quiet, to be submissive, to be, less vocal. Boys can be raised with that same belief, and vice versa, right? So how we're raised absolutely contributes to gender bias and bias in general. How we counteract that is it can be a little bit more complicated, but I always say, control the controllables, right? We can control ourselves, right? We can control the environment that we live in and what we do. And oftentimes when I'm doing leadership training, I talk about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, because how we're raised is how we are, right? There's the argument between nature and nurture, and we're not going to get into that, but sometimes we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone in order to realize what we can achieve. So how we're raised, if you were raised in an environment where you had to adhere to more gender stereotypes, pushing yourself into achieving more in a leadership position or reaching for that promotion, reaching for that leadership position is going to be less comfortable for you. But what that will take is maybe some mentorship, some training, some additional support, so that you can begin to become more self-aware of those traits you may have suppressed as a result of how you were raised. Conversely, part of what we talk about, and the quote from Sheryl Sandberg on which we closed the presentation about, once you become aware of something, you now can't not be part of the change. Part of what we need to do is just raise awareness. And so when you recognize how someone was raised has contributed to their gender bias, either it's someone that you know or it's yourself, being aware of how that has influenced your perspective is the first step, right? We talk about those who struggle with addiction. The first step is acknowledging you have a problem, right? Same thing with gender bias. The first step is acknowledging it, is identifying it, is creating awareness. And so once we can do that, we can start to pull the threads of changing our perspective, of changing our philosophies, of challenging the way that we were raised in order to see things through a different lens. If you grow up, and I'm kind of going off on a diatribe now, and I apologize, but I'll tell you something really interesting. So I just had a birthday. I think I mentioned that my birthday month is April. So I just had a birthday, and I was having dinner with my family. We're all vaccinated. I was having dinner with my family, and we brought up all these old pictures, right, of when we were younger and everybody's weddings and all this kind of stuff. And this picture from my sister's wedding, and I said, wow, because I feel old now because it was my birthday. I'm like, wow, I look kind of good in this picture. My husband was like, yeah, you do. And I don't say that to sound vain, but I'm like, if I knew then what I know now, like, wow, I didn't know I looked that good in that picture, because I was raised with a self-belief that I looked a certain way, right? Like, I wasn't the pretty one. I was kind of overweight and, didn't have this great self-esteem. And I look back at that picture and I'm like, oh man, if I had known then what I knew now, come on. So I think that we're all raised to look at ourselves through a particular lens. We have to challenge that lens. We have to challenge that vision to be able to see what we're really capable of. So that's what I would encourage you to do, is constantly challenge, constantly ask, constantly explore, because there's so much more we all as individuals, as people, are capable of. And being self-limiting doesn't even give anybody the chance to limit you, because you're limiting yourself. Don't do that. There are plenty of other challenges out there. Don't be your worst problem.
Yeah. Good advice. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you to the audience. And I know you have to go to another meeting, but thank you so much.
Thank you. This is super fun.
It was fun.